The ship was silent. Too silent. Captain Elara Voss opened her eyes to find the bridge frozen in a tableau of confusion and fear. Her crew, Kale, Sora, and Harris, were suspended mid-action, hands raised, heads turned, expressions locked in the exact moment she had lost consciousness. No alarms, no flickering lights, just the eerie hum of the reactor and a void that felt alive. Elara's pulse quickened. She tried to move her hand to the console. It obeyed, but nothing else did. Every button, every touch interface, every command she gave failed. The ship itself seemed inert, except for the soft vibrations under her feet, subtle, almost like a heartbeat she could feel through the metal floors. She ran a glance to the viewport. The stars, they weren't right. They bent, twisted. Lines of light folded over themselves like glass caught in a prism. The constellations were impossible. And yet, she could sense an intelligence in the patterns, as if the universe itself was watching her, waiting for her to act. Elara swallowed, steadying herself. "This is real," she whispered, "and they're watching me." The first instinct was fear. The second was survival. She stepped closer to Kale. Her fingertips grazed his arm. A faint vibration traveled up her wrist, resonating with the pulsing hum from outside the ship. Tiny movement. Kale's fingers twitched. One sign that she could still act, that she could still influence what was happening. Her eyes scanned the bridge. Every frozen face, every hand in mid-motion was a puzzle, a test. Whoever or whatever had done this wasn't just pausing time. It was studying her, measuring her choices, testing human unpredictability. She squared her shoulders. "If you're watching me," she said softly but firmly, "then watch this. I am human. I make choices. I act. I survive." The stars outside pulsed, almost imperceptibly, in response. The ship hummed in resonance with her voice, and Elara realized this was more than a test. This was a challenge, not just for her life, not just for her crew, but for humanity itself. She took a deep breath, feeling determination rise in her chest. Every movement, every thought, every small choice mattered now. She would act. She would influence. She would survive. And whatever force had paused the universe, it would learn that humanity could not be frozen, controlled, or ignored. If you're ready to see how she turns the impossible into survival, subscribe, like, and comment below to join the journey. Because the story is about to begin, and it's nothing like you've seen before. Elara's gaze swept the bridge again. The frozen crew felt surreal, almost like mannequins trapped in time. But she knew better. Every twitch, every blink, or lack thereof, was a clue. Something had stopped them, yes, but the entity outside wasn't mindless. It was intelligent, calculating, measuring reactions, waiting for her next move. Her fingers hovered over the console. Nothing responded. She tapped lightly once, twice. A low vibration ran through the deck beneath her boots. Not mechanical, not accidental. A pulse from the force beyond. The stars outside bent and shimmered. It was aware she was trying to communicate. She felt it almost like a physical pressure against her mind. "Kale," she whispered. No response, except a flicker, a subtle flex of his fingers. Encouraging, dangerous, the tiniest signal of life, enough to remind her that she wasn't alone in this paused universe. But she couldn't overthink it. One wrong motion, one wrong gesture, and she might lose them entirely. She took a deep breath and stepped closer to Sora. Her hand brushed the sleeve of her frozen friend. Again, a slight vibration ran up her arm. The entity was reacting, testing. She understood it now. It wasn't just observing, they were its variables, its measurements, its study of humanity's unpredictability. Elara straightened. "I won't be frozen. I won't be a variable in your calculations," she said, her voice steady, confident, sharp. "I am human. I act. I choose." Her words echoed softly across the metallic bridge, but they carried weight. Force. Presence. The stars outside bent again, faster this time, warping into impossible geometries. The pulsing intensified, running through the ship like a living heartbeat. She could almost feel attention brushing against her consciousness, testing her focus, testing her resolve. She scanned the frozen crew once more. Harris's head was tilted unnaturally, lips parted midward. Another sign, another micro-response. Life existed in these pauses. Humanity wasn't erased. Not yet. Elara clenched her fists. She would not wait passively. She would act. Every step, every choice would matter. One deliberate movement at a time. She began to circle the bridge, touching consoles, testing the ship's systems, letting the entity register her intentions. This was no longer about control. It was negotiation. Subtle, human negotiation with something far larger than any human mind could comprehend. Her pulse synchronized, oddly, with the faint hum of energy pulsing through the hull. She felt a connection. Not understanding, not yet, but recognition. She was alive. They were alive. And she would make sure they stayed that way. Elara's hands hovered over the frozen consoles, her fingers trembling slightly as she measured her next move. Each crew member was frozen mid-action, a tableau of uncertainty and fear. Kale's hand still hovered over a blinking console. Sora's arms stretched toward a panel she had been adjusting moments before time stopped, and Harris's head was tilted in mid-speech, lips parted as if caught in an invisible conversation. Every detail was unnervingly perfect, yet she could feel it, something alive, deliberate, intelligent, pressing against her awareness from beyond the viewport. She stepped closer to Kale. Her fingertips brushed his wrist. A faint shiver traveled up her arm. Kale's fingers twitched. Small, almost imperceptible, but it was enough. A signal, life stirring inside the stillness. Her breath hitched slightly. One sign of response meant the entity was aware. It was watching, waiting, measuring, perhaps even learning. The stars outside twisted again. Light bent in ways that made her brain ache to process, forming impossible patterns, impossible geometries. The entity wasn't just observing. It was probing her, testing her reactions, analyzing every choice, every hesitation. She realized she was no longer merely alive. She was a variable, a participant in a game played across scales of space and consciousness she couldn't fully comprehend. Elara's pulse quickened. She knew fear could cripple her, but hesitation would be fatal. She needed to assert presence, to demonstrate unpredictability. I act. I choose. I will not be frozen, she whispered, her voice calm but firm. She reached for Harris, touching his shoulder lightly. A flicker ran through him, tiny but undeniable. Life responding to intention. She moved to Sora. Same method, same gentle contact. Each motion was deliberate, precise. No sudden movements. No rash decisions. She was teaching the entity, communicating with it in a language it could recognize. Human action, deliberate choice, intent. The ship vibrated under her feet. The pulsing intensified, synchronizing almost unnaturally with her heartbeat. The stars outside seemed to bend toward her in acknowledgement. Not submission, not surrender, but recognition. Elara realized that this was a conversation, silent but profound, between a human and something vast, incomprehensible, and eternal. Her eyes swept across the bridge. Slowly, the crew began to stir. Tiny motions, fingers flexing, eyes flickering. The frozen tableau began to dissolve, responding to her presence and determination. Humanity, small but defiant, was pushing back. She had begun to win, not through force, but through deliberate, measured action and the undeniable unpredictability of being human. Elara exhaled, steadying herself. One step, one choice, one touch at a time, she would restore them all. The bridge was no longer still. It was alive, but tense, fragile, charged with the weight of survival, awareness, and cosmic scrutiny. Elara moved carefully across the bridge. Her crew was still mostly frozen, but small twitches betrayed life. Kale's fingers flexed. Harris's eyes flickered. Sora's hand shifted slightly. She breathed slowly. Every movement mattered. One wrong touch could ruin everything. The stars outside bent and warped. Lines of light twisted like liquid. They pulsed in rhythm with the ship. She could feel it pressing against her mind. Elara reached for Kale again. Light touch. A tiny twitch. Encouraging. Dangerous. She nodded. Progress. She moved to Harris. Same method. Gentle touch. Observation. Wait. The pulsing intensified. She felt the entity's attention, almost like a heartbeat brushing her consciousness. I won't be controlled, she whispered. I am human. I choose. I act. I survive. The stars responded, shifting faster, bending into patterns she couldn't decipher. It was testing her, measuring, learning. Elara moved to Sora. Light touch. Fingers flexed. Life returned in increments. Slowly, the bridge became less still. She realized she wasn't just restoring them. She was negotiating. With presence, with intent. Each gesture mattered. Each choice spoke. The ship hummed. The crew twitched again. Tiny but real. Humanity was pushing back. Elara straightened. Her pulse synced with the bridge's vibration. One step at a time, she would restore them all. She would prove that humans couldn't be frozen, controlled, or ignored. Elara's steps echoed softly across the frozen bridge, her boots thudding against the metal floor with careful deliberation. She paused in front of Kale, studying him closely. His hand hovered over the console, fingers slightly curled as if trying to complete an action he could no longer control. She reached out, placing her hand lightly on his forearm. A faint shiver ran up her arm, subtle but undeniable, and Kale's fingers twitched. One small movement. That was all it took to remind her that she still had influence, that humanity was not entirely paused. Her gaze swept to Harris. He had been midward when time seemed to stop, his lips parted, head tilted at a strange angle. Elara's touch was gentle, deliberate. A micro-movement, almost imperceptible, ran through him. She felt a pulse from the ship, a vibration that was not mechanical but alive, as if the very energy around her recognized her intention. Slowly, she moved across the bridge to Sora, tracing her hand along her frozen shoulder. The tiny movements of her crew became cumulative, subtle signs that life was returning in increments. Outside, the stars continued their impossible dance. Light bent and folded across the viewport, forming geometries Elara couldn't hope to comprehend. The pulsing intensified. It was not violent, but it pressed against her mind, a weight she could feel in the back of her skull. She realized that the entity was not merely observing her. It was probing her, calculating her responses, waiting for her to act in ways it could not fully predict. Every small movement she made carried weight. Every deliberate gesture, every choice mattered. Elara exhaled and straightened. She began to move in patterns, touching consoles lightly, pressing keys and sequences, and deliberately repositioning herself to demonstrate autonomy. The ship responded in subtle ways, lights flickering, the hum of the engines changing rhythm. The stars outside pulsed faster, lines bending sharply in response to her actions. It was as though the entity was acknowledging her, not verbally or physically, but with attention, with observation. A negotiation, silent but absolute, had begun. The bridge slowly came alive with movement. Kale's hands flexed again. Harris's eyes blinked fully. Sora's arm shifted from its frozen pose. Tiny increments of life, but unmistakable. The human spark was spreading. Elara's heart raced as she realized she was no longer simply restoring her crew. She was communicating through action, proving unpredictability and resilience in a universe that sought to suppress it. She paused, looking around. The ship was alive in a new way, charged with tension, energy, and awareness. She felt it pulse through her chest. Her crew was responding. Humanity was asserting itself. The entity's attention pressed close, palpable, but she no longer felt helpless. She had taken the first significant step. The next phase would require bolder choices, deliberate risks, and a full demonstration that humans could act, think, and survive, even under scrutiny from a force that spanned the stars. Elara took a slow step across the bridge. The floor hummed under her boots. Not mechanical. Something alive. Something observing. Kale's fingers twitched again. Harris's eyes flickered. Sora's hand moved slightly. Tiny motions, but enough to tell her she still had influence. She exhaled and steadied herself. One wrong move could stop everything. One wrong touch and life might vanish again. The stars outside twisted, bended light, shapes she could not comprehend. They pulsed in rhythm with the ship. She felt it pressing against her mind. Testing, waiting, judging. Elara moved to Kale. Light touch. She pressed just enough to feel a response. His fingers curled, flexed. One small sign. Progress. She went to Harris. Same method. Gentle touch. Micro movement. The pulsing outside intensified. It reacted. She was not invisible. Sora's frozen hand followed. Tiny shifts. Each crew member regained awareness incrementally. Life returned in steps. Slowly, deliberately, they were coming back. Elara's pulse matched the hum of the ship. Each beat, each motion, each breath mattered. The entity was learning, or negotiating. She could not tell which. I act. I choose. I survive, she whispered. Her voice cut through the silence. Calm, steady, firm. The stars outside bent again. Faster this time. Lines intersected. Geometries impossible to calculate. But she felt recognition. Not compliance. Not surrender. Acknowledgement. She touched Kale again. Fingers flexed. Harris blinked fully. Sora's arm moved. Micro movements spreading like ripples. Humanity responding. Elara's eyes swept the bridge. The frozen tableau dissolved. Slowly. Unpredictably. Life returning. Each small step was proof. Proof the humans could act under scrutiny. That unpredictability mattered. The ship hummed louder now. Charged with tension. Energy, awareness. The entity's presence pressed closer, heavier, more tangible. Elara straightened. Determination surged. One step at a time, one choice at a time. They would all be restored. Humanity would not be paused. Humanity would not be ignored. The first true negotiation had begun, but the stakes were immense. Every movement, every gesture, every thought mattered. Elara paused in the center of the bridge. The ship hummed beneath her. Soft, vibrating, alive. Not mechanical. Something else. Something immense. She looked at her crew. Kale's fingers flexed again. Harris blinked slowly. Sora's hand twitched. Tiny movements. But enough. Enough to tell her they were responding. The stars outside twisted violently. Lines of light bent into impossible angles. Shapes collided. Formed new patterns. The universe itself seemed to breathe. She could feel its presence pressing against her mind. Watching, waiting, Elara stepped toward Kale. Her hand brushed his shoulder. His fingers twitched sharply. Her response. She smiled faintly. One gesture, one choice. That was all it took. She moved to Harris. Touch, observe, wait. Another flicker of awareness. The pulsing outside quickened. Recognition. Something acknowledged her action. Sora came next. Fingers curled. Small flex. A tiny breath. Life returning piece by piece. The bridge no longer frozen, but fragile. Tentative. Every movement mattered. Every gesture carried weight. Elara exhaled. She could feel the entity probing her mind. Testing her reactions. Measuring her. Not hostile, but deliberate. It wanted to know how a human would act under impossible pressure. I choose. I act. I survive, she whispered. Short sentences. Clear. Firm. The entity felt her presence. Its pulse responded, almost in rhythm with hers. The ship vibrated along with it. The frozen tableau of her crew dissolved slowly. Micro movements spread. Fingers flexing. Heads tilting. Blinks returning. Life returning. Humanity asserting itself against incomprehensible power. Elara realized something vital. This was not just survival, not just restoration. This was communication, silent negotiation with a force beyond comprehension. She had influence. She could push, test, respond. The stars pulsed faster. Lines bent more violently. Energy ran through the bridge, through her bones, through her chest. She was connected, Her actions mattered. The universe reacted. She straightened, breathing steadily. One step at a time. One touch at a time. It would all be restored. Humanity would endure. The entity would learn. The stakes had grown. Every decision now carried the weight of survival. Every movement was critical, and Elara knew the next step would require bold action. Not just to restore her crew, but to assert humanity itself in a universe that refused to be tamed. Elara's eyes swept the bridge again. The crew was no longer completely frozen. Kale's hands moved, flexing at the joints. Harris blinked fully, lips parting as if trying to speak. Sora's arms shifted, tiny movements but real. Progress. Small, fragile but undeniable. The stars outside were chaotic. Light bent in impossible arcs, folding over itself. Shapes collided and split, forming patterns she could not comprehend. The entity was aware of her actions. Reacting, testing, waiting. She stepped closer to Kale. Her fingertips grazed his forearm. Another twitch. Another micro-movement. Encouraging. Dangerous. Every small reaction mattered. Every tiny gesture carried weight. She moved to Harris. Same method. Touch lightly. Observe. Wait. Another flicker. The pulsing from outside intensified. It wasn't violent, but it pressed against her mind like a physical weight. She could feel the intelligence measuring her, calculating her responses. Sora next. Fingers curled. Tiny flexes. A breath. A blink. Slowly, the bridge came alive again, one incremental movement at a time. Humanity was asserting itself, proving it could not be paused or ignored. Elara exhaled slowly. She realized the ship was now a negotiation chamber. Not with words, not with weapons, but with presence, with deliberate choice. Every motion she made was a statement. Humans act. Humans surviva. Humans improvisa. She began moving more deliberately, touching consoles, pressing keys, testing sequences, observing how the ship and the entity reacted. Each pulse from outside intensified or slowed, depending on her actions. The energy in the bridge matched her heartbeat. The frozen tableau of the crew continued to thaw. Micro-movements became larger. Hands stretched, fingers grasped. Heads tilted, eyes focused. Life was returning, slowly but undeniably. Elara stepped back and raised her voice. We act. We choose. We survive, she said firmly. Short, clear words. The entity reacted immediately. Light outside bent faster, lines folding into sharper angles. Recognition, not compliance, not surrender. Acknowledgement. Her chest rose and fell with deliberate control. She knew the next step would demand more. Bolder movements, more deliberate choices. She had proven humanity's presence, but now she had to assert it fully. The bridge hummed. The crew flexed, blinked, stirred. Energy pulsed through the ship, syncing with her heartbeat. Humanity was alive again, and the entity could feel it. Elara stepped toward the center console. The ship hummed beneath her, resonating with her pulse. The energy was alive, responsive, almost conscious. She could feel it in her bones. Every step sent vibrations through the deck. Every motion drew the entity's attention. Kale's fingers flexed fully now. Harris blinked rapidly. Sora's arm moved freely. Micro-movements had become deliberate. Life was returning one step at a time. But it wasn't complete. Not yet. She needed full agency restored before she could act boldly. The stars outside twisted violently. Lines of light folded and snapped, forming geometries impossible for a human mind to process. The entity wasn't hostile. Not exactly, but was testing her, probing her responses, watching how she acted under pressure, calculating her choices, measuring unpredictability. Elara took a deep breath. Her voice was steady. We are human. We act. We choose. She moved deliberately, touching each console, each crew member in sequence. Every movement mattered. Every gesture spoke. The entity responded subtly, with pulses of energy that ran through the ship. Kale moved fully, flexing fingers and shifting his weight. Harris blinked, then spoke softly. Sora stretched her arm, testing range of motion. Tiny victories, each one adding to the momentum. Humanity was returning. Not erased, not paused, alive. Elara realized the bridge was no longer frozen. It was tense, charged, vibrant. The entity's presence was heavy, but it reacted to her every choice. She could push, test, provoke, and it would respond. She had influence. She had leverage. She stepped closer to the viewport. The twisted stars pulsed faster. Lines of light shimmered. The entity was aware of her thoughts, her intent, her deliberate actions. She realized then that the battle wasn't just to restore the crew. It was to assert humanity itself. Her pulse quickened. One step, one touch, one deliberate choice at a time. She had proven unpredictability mattered. She had proven human action mattered. And she would continue. She would assert control without force. Influence without violence. Elara's gaze swept the bridge. Crew fully aware now. Micro-movements complete. Humanity intact. But the entity would not stop. She knew the next steps would demand bold choices, calculated risks, and a full demonstration of human presence against incomprehensible intelligence. Elara stood in the center of the bridge, breathing steadily. Her crew was fully aware now. Kale flexed his fingers, tested the consoles. Harris blinked, shook his head, and muttered softly. Sora stretched, moving freely for the first time. Life was returning, piece by piece. The stars outside pulsed violently. Lines of light folded into impossible patterns. Shapes collided. Colors shifted. The entity's presence pressed against her mind, heavy and aware. Watching every move, measuring every choice. Elara took deliberate steps toward Kale. Light touch on his shoulder. A nod. Encouraging. Calculated. Dangerous. He responded immediately, flexing more, testing movement. The energy in the ship shifted slightly, almost like approval. She moved to Harris. Gentle touch. Observe. Wait. Blink. Micro-movement became full movement. The pulsing outside accelerated, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. The entity was learning, adapting, testing her next actions. Sora came last. A brush along her arm. Fingers flexed. Breath returned. The bridge was no longer frozen. Humanity was asserting itself. Every small movement mattered. Every choice spoke volumes. Elara's pulse matched the hum of the ship. Her thoughts focused, clear, sharp. This was no longer restoration alone. This was negotiation. A silent, tense conversation with something incomprehensible. I act. I choose. I survive, she whispered. Short, deliberate sentences. Clear, firm. Each word echoed across the metallic bridge. The entity pulsed in response. Recognition, not surrender, not compliance. Awareness. The crew moved independently now. Micro-movements became deliberate gestures. The ship hummed in resonance with them. Humanity was alive, present, unpredictable. Elara exhaled, scanning the bridge. One step at a time, one touch at a time, they would be fully restored. Humanity would endure. The entity had learned a simple fact. Unpredictability, choice, and human resilience could not be paused or controlled. She straightened. Her chest rose. The next step would require bold action. A direct challenge. Not to destroy, but to assert. To prove humanity's presence mattered in a universe that had tried to freeze them. Elara's gaze swept across the bridge. Her crew moved freely now. Kale adjusted a console, testing functionality. Harris straightened, shaking off the last remnants of frozen posture. Sora stretched, flexing her fingers, testing motion, testing the reality around them. Life was back, but the bridge still hummed with tension. The stars outside pulsed in impossible patterns. Light twisted, bent, folded in ways her mind could barely comprehend. The entity was watching, pressing against her awareness, measuring every action, every decision. Not hostile, but testing. Evaluating. Calculating. Elara moved deliberately. Her hand hovered over a console, then pressed lightly. A ripple ran through the ship, a wave of energy that reached outward, brushing the stars themselves. Tiny, deliberate gestures of control. Signals that she was present, that she was acting, that humans could not be paused. She stepped to Kale. "Check the systems," she said. Short, direct command. He obeyed immediately. Harris followed, running diagnostics. Sora recalibrated the bridge's energy flow. Each crew member fully operational, fully alive. Actions flowing naturally now. The pulsing from outside intensified. The entity responded. Not violently, not in aggression, but in recognition. Each movement, each deliberate choice, each assertion of human action caused subtle shifts in the warped cosmos. Lines of light folded, unbent, adjusted as if acknowledging her presence. Elara took a deep breath. She realized the bridge was no longer just a ship. It was a stage, a negotiation space. Every gesture mattered. Every choice sent a signal. She was not just restoring life. She was asserting humanity itself. She moved to the center, voice firm. "We are human. We act. We choose. And we survive." The stars outside pulsed, bending in rapid sequences. Recognition. Awareness. The entity understood, at least partially, that humans were autonomous. Unpredictable. Alive. The bridge vibrated softly. Crew moving naturally now. Micro-movements became deliberate. Humanity had regained agency. And Elara understood. They had proven something essential. Survival was not enough. Presence, action, and choice defined humanity in a universe that tested everything. Her pulse slowed slightly. A small smile tugged at her lips. One decisive action had set the stage for the next challenge. Humanity was alive. The entity knew it, and the universe would never forget it. Elara stood in the center of the bridge, breathing evenly. Her crew moved naturally now. Kale monitored the consoles, checking systems. Harris spoke softly, testing his voice. Sora stretched, flexed, ready to act. Life had fully returned. The stars outside still twisted and pulsed. Impossible angle, impossible choc. But the intensity had softened. The entity was aware. It recognized their presence, their choices, their humanity. Elara approached the viewport. She watched the warped light, feeling the force behind it, immense and intelligent. Not hostile, not violent. Curious, testing, measuring, and now respecting. She turned to her crew. "We are alive. We are human. And we will endure," she said firmly. Short, decisive sentences. Clear, precise. Kale nodded, eyes focused. Harris exhaled, shoulders relaxing. Sora smiled faintly. Humanity had returned fully to the bridge. Autonomy restored. Life restored. Elara stepped back. The bridge hummed softly. Energy pulsed, subtle now. Like a heartbeat she could feel beneath her boots. The ship, the crew, even the stars outside, all alive in different ways. She realized what had changed. They had not defeated the entity. They had not destroyed it. But they had proven something essential. Choice mattered. Action mattered. Human unpredictability mattered. Her gaze swept the bridge once more. Crew alive, systems functional, ship stable. The universe had observed, tested, and acknowledged. Humanity had endured. Elara exhaled. One small smile. One deep breath. The challenge was not over, but they had survived the first test. And survival had never felt more deliberate, more human, or more alive. The bridge was quiet now, alive with possibility, charged with potential. And for the first time since the ship had paused, Elara felt in control. Not absolute, but enough. Enough to continue. Enough to assert humanity in a universe that tried to freeze it.